What is the worst thing you have ever witnessed another person do? One day a few hours after school I saw a freshman pick up a syringe from the ground near a trash can. Then run over to one of his friends and stabbed him in the leg with it as a joke. After the kid who got stabbed and others in their group started freaking out, the kid who did the stabbing just sat there playing off like it was great joke. And kept calling the other kid a pussy because it won't hurt that bad. I know people rag on how dumb kids are nowadays. But this moron didn't understand why everyone was losing their shit after stabbing someone with what is almost certainly a used syringe. When I was 6 I witnessed a neighbor strangle my other neighbor's dogs to death with a black cable. I had to go in for police questioning. I was the only one who knew what happened because I ran home and told my mom. She called cops. Edit, spelling. When I was 17 I did charity work, feeding the homeless. I walked up an alleyway to refill an urn with boiling water for tea coffee and passed a gentleman injecting heroin into his pen 15. I was about 6 or 7. Sometimes hung out with a slightly crazy older kid who lived a few doors down. One day he said, "Come check this out." So I followed him on my bike down to an overgrown riverbank near where we lived. He'd found a hibernating hedgehog. But the moment he pulled out his penknife I realized it wasn't the hedgehog itself that he wanted to show me. He proceeded to stab the sleeping animal multiple times. I have no idea why he did it. I was left numb. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever mentioned this to anyone before. When I was 13, I saw a homeless guy get whacked right across the face with what appeared to be a pipe by another homeless gentleman. The way it caved in was absolutely disgusting as his eye was no longer one with a socket. Got a call for a patient being stuck in a compromising position. A teenager was fooling around with her dog and he knotted in her and became stuck. Family found her and called 911. We get there and have to put her and the dog on the stretcher to take them out to the ambulance. We had the firefighters hold up blankets around the duo to try to protect what's left of her modesty. Her dad was yelling at her, calling her a who or skank slutect. She replied that her dog was the only guy who understood and cared for her and he, the dad, would never understand. It was a very ducked up call. When I was around 7 years old I loved animals. I wanted to be a vet and I wanted to take care of anything I could. So you could imagine how my head exploded when I saw a cute possum mother and its babies. Well, apparently an old man who lived down the street didn't like that the possums were hanging out on the road so early in the morning. My mom and I watched as the man picked up all of the possums, there were probably about 8, and threw them into a garbage bag. Then he tied up the bag, threw it on the ground and stomped the possums to death. It was really traumatizing to see. TLDR watched someone stomp baby possums and their mother to death. When we were around 12, we were going to go for a swim in my friend's pool. My friend's older sister was floating on a pool float in their pool. She seemed asleep and was drifting around the pool. My friend quietly climbed the diving board, pulled out his big dig and waited. I was half laughing and half worrying about the storm he was about to create. Sure enough, he pissed on her. Initial shock turned into sister fury when she realized it wasn't a squirt gun, but piss. She was in the water and after my friend so fast he barely had time to put his big dig away. His parents thought it would be best if I went home. That kid was a ducking menace. Had a guy pull in front of me and hit his brakes as hard as he could. I rear-ended him. He was a big dig to me, the cops, and my insurance. Even though there was no damage to his car. He also went to the emergency room. We found out he's had 91 insurance claims. This probably pales in comparison to other people's. But while I'd heard about people like this who commit insurance fraud for a living, I didn't know they actually existed. My grandfather and I were in his backyard. He was doing yard work and I was just being a kid wandering around. He called me over saying, "Do you want to see some baby mice?" I ran over and looked into the hole he stood next to and saw 6-8 baby mice. I looked up at my grandfather and said, "Why are they jerking like that?" He replied, "I stomped on them so they won't go in the house." Why the duck did he call me over to see baby mice in their death throes? One day at church I saw a parent spill their son's Cheerios and instead of picking them up they set their son on the floor to eat them off the ground. I laughed. But still. Not me. But a former friend of mine told me many times how he watched his best friend get shot by a sniper in Bosnia while crossing the street to buy smokes. That and a lot of other things messed him up so badly he shot himself last year. One night I decided to get to know my new neighbors. After a couple of beers. It was just me and this guy left. He mentioned how he was shot by a sniper in Bosnia. A lucky wound just in his arm. Showed me the scar. Then broke down. He was devastated by the fact it was a woman who shot him. And what happened to the mother who had shot him? His squad mate held the glass up to him so he could watch the aftermath of the artillery. And he got more of a show than he bargained for. I had no idea what to say or do. And he apologized a few minutes later. Took another beer and left. I felt really bad. But had no idea what to do. The guy was arrested not so long after for a massive overreaction to some situation when someone threatened him. That was the last I heard of him. When I was 15 we were playing football in my front yard. When we heard screaming from the woods that lined the yard. All of a sudden the little kid that lived behind me came running fully engulfed in flames. Everybody else panicked and ran away. I took off my coat and put him out. He was just laying on the ground looking at me asking if he was going to die. I told him he would be fine and help was on the way. He lived. But burned 90% of his body. He later said he was trying to flick lit matches into the wind like he seen the older boys doing. The day before my friends and myself were flipping lit matches at each other. That was 16 years ago. I still have nightmares every now and again. 2005 Southern Baghdad. Mahdi army fighters tied a screaming boy by his legs to the back of a car bumper and just drove off. Blood and pieces of flesh were strewn throughout the street for a few blocks. People were cheering. Oh duck in Mahdi militia. I got stories about those assholes. In 2004 the US Army essentially put a hit out on al-Sadr. We went to Najaf in the summer of 2004 to hunt these people. Our role was to shoot anyone wearing black and green. So I mean hunt in the most literal sense of the word. It was open season on those assholes. They would set up fake police checkpoints and just murder the people coming through. This was during the time of some holy pilgrimage to a mosque in Najaf. So it was a lot of ducking people getting caught in this crap. God, that place was a nightmare. It was so hot our vehicles would sink into the pavement of the roads like they were made out of Play-Doh. My grandmom screaming at my mom on my birthday for not being able to do house chores while my mom had a severe autoimmune disease. She couldn't walk around for more than maybe 10 minutes. Had neuropathy, numb extremities. And couldn't eat more than 5 different foods at that time. My high school science teacher held a wild rabbit in front of the entire, all girls, class by grabbing its ears and body. Then twisting, crushing it. Blood exploding from both ends as it flailed. She did this for no reason other than she was a sadistic itch. The girl who had found it had it in a box to take home to her dad who was a vet. It had been resting comfortably and eating. This was also the time I did the worst thing I'd ever done. I tipped over a bottle of pure sodium, it was in a non-reactive oil, into the leaky sink where it had been left on the edge. I blew up the sink. I admit it. I don't care. I was on my way out the back door and my elbow clipped it with the divine guidance of God. A while back I was at the train station and there was this old homeless man begging for some food. Some people who worked at the snack bar closely were throwing fries at the floor so he would eat it. I wanted to buy the guy some fries, a burger and a drink, but they told I wasn't allowed to give it to him. When I said fine, I'll get him good somewhere else, one of the guys actually followed me and tried to physically stop from buying food for a homeless person. My dad's ex-wife has a lot of mental issues. She does some crazy things because of it, and for whatever reason, my dad would just go along with her batshit ideas when they were married. When I was around 10 or so, we went on a trip to a resort. My former stepmom and my sister, who is a year older than me, got into it over something. I'm sure it was really stupid. The next thing I know, my dad is pinning my sister down so his wife can hit and punch her. My step-siblings, who were toddlers at the time, were right there and I'm trying to keep them from seeing it. But I was afraid I'd get in trouble too if I tried to leave, so I just piled us into a corner. I had many WTF moments after that. I've had to explain to a 4-year-old why his mom is passed out on the kitchen floor. I've had to explain to police that I was not cooking meth in my bedroom on my flat iron. Growing up was crazy shit. What my dad did to his own child definitely takes the cake as most fucked up thing I've seen a person do though. I saw 2 guys fight in a field when I was in high school. A classic 1vs1 with no one jumping in. One of the guys lands heavy punch and knocks the other guy out. The winner is walking away towards his buddies, hands up, talking about how awesome he is. Out of nowhere one of his friends runs past him and jumps into the air over the unconscious guy, lifts his knees against his chest, and comes down with both feet onto the guy's face. Edit. Afterward. After he landed on the guy's face he just slowly backed away. For the most part everyone was just in shock. A lot of people just turned around and quickly went back to the parking lot, probably scared of what was going to happen next. The guy who knocked him out just yelled, "What the duck did you do that for? You ducking animal," and started laughing. His other buddies started laughing as well and calling him crazy and badass, saying this dude don't give a duck. And the guy seemed to be in his glory as they walked away, leaving the guy on the ground. We called an ambulance and stayed with the guy until they came. He didn't wake up while we were there. He just made a lot of gurgling and heavy breathing noises. The police came as well and were more interested in what started the fight and basically took our names and said we might hear from them if the guy presses charges. A friend of mine was a high school teacher and a girls basketball coach. One girl was upset about her lack of playing time, so she and her mother came up with a plan to get my friend fired. They accused him of raping the girl. The police arrested my friend, tossed him in jail. This was on a Thursday night. He had to spend Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in jail. He got arraigned. His name was splashed across every paper in the state. By Wednesday, police punched enough holes in their bullshit story to drop charges and release my friend. The school fired him anyhow. Not a single thing happened to the girl or her mother. I once saw a teenage girl urinating on a pregnancy in the middle of the day in an alleyway. Alternatively, I saw a man punch a 5-year-old child in the face. I know you meant pregnancy test, but I really want to believe she was peeing on a pregnant woman's stomach. I was in a roller coaster accident at Six Flags in 2001. My girlfriend and I waiting to get on the front row of the Batman ride. After dropping out of the first loop, my girlfriend's leg slammed a guy in the back of the head. An employee had snuck into the area underneath the coaster in order to heal himself. When her leg hit the back of his head, I heard audible cracking and blood splattered all over us and the stark white rocks below. That was the beginning of the ride, so we had time to reflect and look back at the body on the ground. I was 14. My brother's ex-wife was the worst person I have ever met. She physically, sexually, and mentally abused him. She stole tens of thousands of dollars. She is morbidly obese and a horrible person. Her life is the worst thing I have ever seen a person do. This will probably be buried, but anyway. OP might like to hear it. New Year's Day about 5 years ago, I was driving through the city with my parents when I saw a guy getting beaten up on the side of the road. He was on the ground defenseless, getting kicked. A pool of blood was evident on the ground and the attacker showed no signs of stopping. The sickening thing is that 15-20 cars drove past and didn't do anything. The cars were moving at a snail's pace and could easily see what was happening. That's the worst thing I've seen a human do to another. Not stand up for someone who could easily have been healed by a loose kick. If anyone is wondering, my dad stopped the car and broke up the fight after calling the cops, and it really made me try from that moment on to help others in danger. TLDR, my dad gave me a hero complex. Edit, guys, the hero complex line was a joke. And I live in Ireland, so the chances of someone carrying a gun are so slim that it is negligible. someone drove a car into my girlfriend. Luckily it only broke her foot, but that was not a nice thing to happen. Edit, she's still my girlfriend and no, I did not do it. It was a very upsetting thing to happen, guys. Be an informant. When I was deployed we had an informant we called Shakes because he would come to us shaking. He supplied to us information regarding insurgent activity, names, and locations. The stress of it all really ate at him, giving him the shakes and a lot of wrinkles. He was maybe late 30s. Smoked constantly. He said he was doing it for his family, wife, and son. After a week or two, Shakes stopped coming. We learned he and his family had been executed for helping us. That is probably the worst thing I have seen someone do. Risk their family. This was late 2004. I don't have proof. Not me, but my mom. She, her sister, and her mom were at my great aunt's house with her 2 children. Cue great uncle coming home obliterated and belligerently drunk. Great aunt locks him outside. He starts yelling that he's going to kill them all and starts hacking down the door with an axe. Great aunt tells my mom, the eldest, to get the younger kids in the back bedroom and proceeds to shoot her husband dead with a shotgun. My mom doesn't like guns. Not that bad, but a bully shot 6 barbecue skewers into my head with a gun he made out of PVC pipes. 3 friends and myself went to another friend's house to invite him to a birthday party. We went up to his door, knocked, and he came outside to talk to us. He was acting really shady and told us, hold on a second, I will be right back. We had driven by him, stopped on the side of the road no more than 20 minutes earlier, and he had yelled something at us. Sounded like he was mad. He was being ticketed by the police at the time, so we didn't stop and talk. When he came back outside, his hands were behind his back. We asked him what was wrong and he pulls out a pistol and starts pointing it at us. My friend closest to him sees that it's a pistol but thought he was just screwing around, so he starts laughing and grabs at the pistol. The dude shoots my friend right through his right bicep and runs into the house. I was standing about 4 feet away. We later found out he thought we were coming to lure him outside so we could beat him up. All we wanted to do was invite him to a birthday party. When I was about 4, I walked in on my dad hitting my mum. He had his foot on her face and was whacking her everywhere with a metal spoon. He screamed at me to leave and mum screamed at me to stay. I just sat there and cried. Back in high school during 4th of July weekend, I was walking in my neighborhood lighting off fireworks. I came across some kids from my grade who had the larger fireworks, M80, mortars, firecrackers, and tagged along to watch them blast those off, as I only had small bottle rockets and Roman candles and never really got to shoot the exploding type fireworks. We came to one of their houses and the ringleader of the group said he would be back and came down with his sister's pet hamster that he had to take care of due to his sister being out of town. Frustrated with having to care for it, he strapped on a M80 and lit the wick and let the little hamster run as the fuse ticked down. I still can picture the explosion. Smelled pretty bad. It was pretty messed up. Needless to say, I left almost immediately and didn't hang out with them again. High schooler blew up his sister's hamster with her M80 while she was out of town. I saw 2 brothers arguing about something on the streets. And then after one of them was done, he went inside their house, grabbed a 15 centimeters long knife, and stabbed him right in the heart. When he was dying right in the middle of the street, he started to shout to his brother, "I forgive you," over and over while his brother was on his knee crying. It was something straight out of a movie. That's the kind of stuff you see when you live in the East neighborhood in the city. I watched my uncle beat the shit out of my 4-year-old cousin with his fists. I begged my aunt to stop it and she just got annoyed and they hit her harder. I have no tolerance for adults who hurt children in that way whatsoever. I fear if I saw that now I would kill that person. I get so filled with rage just thinking about it. I went to middle school with a girl who was grossly obese. She came from a family of morbidly obese people. Her dad had even had a heart transplant. We lived in the same general neighborhood, so I rode the bus with her. One day, she was one of the last kids to get on the bus. She sat down, and every other person who was sitting on her side of the bus immediately got up and moved to the other side. Without saying a word. Apparently they'd all discussed it beforehand. I was already sitting on the other side. Nobody had talked about it with me. I'm glad I was already sitting on the other side. Because I have no idea what unpopular 13-year-old me would have done otherwise. I like to think I would have stayed. But either decision would have utterly sucked. I ran into her probably 9 or 10 years ago. She'd lost so much weight that I didn't recognize her. She wasn't skinny. But she was maybe 20 pounds overweight at most. I was really happy for her. I'm a cop. Tried to get into a house to stop someone killing themselves. Got inside just as the person dropped to hang himself. Broke his neck and died right in my face. Worst part of my job.